Hey, I'm Lawrence Funderburke, former Ohio State Buckeye, played in the early 90s, was a part of the Big Ten championship run in 1992. We came up one short of reaching the Final Four. We lost to that team up north. All right. Okay. I said Michigan. Okay. The Fab Five. Okay. No one would know about the Fab Five had they not beat us and gone on to the Final Four.
Right.
And then from there, played in professionally for 11 years, played 8 years in NBA, 3 years overseas, and started a nonprofit organization with my wife in the late 1990s. And we've been focusing on that ever since. I became a certified financial planner. I got my MBA when I was planning the MBA because I knew one day, Frank, that ball would stop bouncing. And what was Lawrence Funderburke going to do with his life? And if he didn't understand purpose, he was going to struggle for the rest of his life. And then I really focus on bridging gaps that we see in our society, particularly as someone who's an activist. But I have a different twist in terms of what my activism looks like and really about being a difference maker and really getting people to galvanize the moment, right? It's not about a movement. It's about a moment, because with a movement, you can opt out, but a moment, you can only opt in. And a movement waits on time, but a moment takes advantage and uses time, right? So that's how I look at my life. I've always been, as they say, a little bit different. People said, he's different. He's a different guy. He thinks different. He responds. And you're exactly right. I grew up in the ghetto. I grew up in the projects. And the only way I was going to make it out, I had to be different. If I was like everybody else, I'd have been stuck and stranded there.
Right.
So I am different, but I don't look at it as a negative. I look at it as a positive.
And I've found that most people that become different makers are different people. They don't follow. It's not that you don't follow the norm. It's just that you see different angles, different things, different ways of doing things that people that just have blinders on don't get. And I think I can go back to watching some of the games that you played and some of the things that you accomplished in college. Like, this isn't just your normal basketball player. He doesn't play just like a big guy. He doesn't just play like someone who's just going to fit into multiple positions, especially the NBA. It's like, I'll guard whoever I have to guard. I'll do what you ask me to do, but I'm going to go out and attack it the way that I have to attack it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I always saw myself as being different or being diverse, right? So I think my game and the way I played was ahead of itself, so to speak. It would fit in very nicely today in terms of being able to handle the ball, shoot outside, post up, have the mid-range game, the long distance game, and I told my mom, I said, you know what, you had me about a decade too early. I told my mom that, and she laughed at me and gave me a strange look. But just my game and diversity of game, but importantly is how I see myself as a person, right? Just being different, being diverse, not just being an athlete, right? But being able to use my mind and saying, listen, just because I'm an athlete doesn't mean I don't have anything meaningful to say. And I think so many athletes fit into that stereotypical box, so to speak. You can't put me in a box. I've never been able to be placed in a box. And I think who are like that, they're seen as a threat to the status quo because they don't fit in. You talked about Robert Smith. You talked about certain athletes who are very vocal, but they're very bright. And a lot of times people say, wait a minute, this doesn't fit the mold, right? So people get a little bit nervous with individuals like that.
Well, and if I may be projecting here, but if I remember seeing your first season in the NBA, you walked on the court like, yeah, I'm supposed to be here. It's not like I'm playing against this guy, I'm playing against that guy, who's on my team. All that's like, well, they brought me in here to do what I'm supposed to do. And that translates to when you get into the quote unquote real world, you're not afraid, you're not nervous. Like, I know what I can do, I know what I'm supposed to do, let's go do it.
Yeah, and all players need some fundamentals, right? You have to have fundamentals. And particularly as you age, particularly in any sport, the fundamentals actually get you through because you don't have the athletic ability like you once to could run and jump. And I think of a prime example is, Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, two of the game's greatest players. Obviously, arguably, Michael Jordan is the game's greatest player. And Kobe, you certainly would put him at the very near top as well. And I remember my rookie year, I grew up in the projects. I grew up in the ghetto. I remember when we were playing. And so you grew up in that environment, you talk a lot of trash. I remember my rookie year, I said, this is my moment. I talk about being in the moment, and I walked past Michael Jordan. I had gotten fouled on the play. He was at the free throw line, and I walked past him. And I said, "Nobody can stop me out here." Now that was one of the most stupidest things I've ever said in my life, and I can't say exactly what he said to me, because it's public and some of the language he used, but he said, Lawrence, he says, this is not Ohio State. I said, wow, man, Michael Jordan used to watch me at Ohio State. Yeah, they watch because they want to see who they're going to be playing against, right? What's the competition looks like, especially, and it's not now just college. They look at high school players, right? Because a lot of them are going to matriculate right to the NBA. But he says, this is not Ohio State. He says, you're on a whole nother level now. He says, you got to bring it every day. And if you don't, you can be in the league and out the league if you don't bring it every day. Here was a man who he had already won several championships. This was his last championship that he won in 1998, but he woke me up to the reality of excellence, something that I know about. But if you don't apply yourself to excellence in everything you do, it's going to catch up with you and it's going to come back to haunt you. Excellence never takes a day off. And excellence is not a resting place, it's a journey. And that's what I try to get young people to understand. You don't have to be perfect, but you must be excellent. Excellence is what I'm all about, and that's what sustains the great ones.
Now, so we're transitioning out of that life. So you're now playing in Europe, and you're thinking, what are you thinking? Where am I going to go when the knees are done, when the jump shot is gone, and you're playing in a foreign country? Are you thinking, now I have a plan, or it's like, what's going to come next?
Yeah, and I played overseas 3 years before I played in NBA. And you're right. I had experienced a torn Achilles my last year with Sacramento. And most people say at your age, you just don't really recover from that. And I was just like, wow, what do I do with my life now? But I prepared. And I always say, you have to prepare ahead of time. Gail Sayers said it best. He says, an athlete should prepare in the beginning of his career instead of the end of his career so that he has something to do afterwards. And I think we get it backwards. We try to prepare afterwards instead of before. And that's where a lot of athletes get in trouble. So I knew one day the ball would stop bouncing for Lawrence Funderburke, right? And that have something of substance behind me. What was I going to do with my life? And I tell people all the time, if you're not Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant or one of the game's greatest athletes in any sport, right? People, they don't really care, right? It's what do you have to offer? What is your value proposition? What separates you from others? And I think athletes have a unique perspective because if they can leverage and use the gifts and the talents that God has given them, right, they can leverage all of the things that they used in that sport to make a difference. And that's what I do. Even if you don't like basketball, you understand basketball, you can use basketball terminology to convey very powerful life truths. And that's what it's really about. And I think, but you got to have some substance behind you. So I always took education seriously. I love reading, and you know this, and I'll be frank, is that we've all been told as African Americans, if you don't want Black people to know something, you put it where? In a book. Okay. Right, exactly. And a lot of us don't read. We just don't read. We don't expand our mind. And reading not only allows you to get into the mind of the author, but reading allows you to be able to read people in situations, right, correctly, clearly, and contextually, right? I love reading. I've always enjoyed reading. I love to read books that are different. That's why I say being different, right, allowed me to be a difference maker by the grace of God, because I realized that diversity, right, was very important to be successful in life. And athletes, when you have that one track, that myopic view, I'm just an athlete, right? You fall victim to that. And in turn, you're taking advantage of the system instead of the system, being allowed to taking advantage of the system. So I think the diversity is key, interest, and really expanding your mind, your network really influences, I always say, your network, not just your financial network, but your personal network. That is more important than financial network, because that's what separates you from others. And that's what gives you your value proposition.
Well, when and I was one of those kids that everyone looked, I devoured books. I just didn't read them. I devoured them. So I understand exactly what you're talking about. And you get into a mindset of different ways of thinking, different ways of looking at things. It's a discovery process. And, even if you're reading a comic book, you're discovering something, because your mind has to now visualize what it is that your brain just read. And when you're able to do that, and it gives you a different perspective on so many different things, because you're thinking, what was that guy talking about there? What was he thinking when he wrote those words? What was this theory? What was this process? And now you apply that to how you do things. You may not do it exactly like they do it, but you end up saying, now, how do I create a process? How do I provide what I want to provide for people? How do I come up with a theory to how I do things? Yeah, and that's a very good point. Now,
I was going to say that, most people read for entertainment value, not for empowerment value.
Right. Right. That's a very good point. Yeah, you can get a lot from that. Just wasting time, I guess, is a good way of putting it. So now, so we're in the middle of starting these projects that you're working on. How do you decide what I'm going to do? How do you decide how I'm going to impact lives? How do you decide who I partner with?
Hmm. Yeah, it's really about asking some simple questions. I think inquisitive people are really driven people, and they're driven not just by success, right, but just by excellence and being able to fulfill the purpose, the calling that has been placed on their lives. And for me is, answering the question, who am I? Not what I was, because oftentimes if you ask someone who you are, they'll tell you your name. No, I'm not asking them. Who are you, right?
Right.
The second one, what do you stand for? What do you value, right? You have to have some non-negotiable values. If you don't stand for something, you fall for what? Anything,
Anything.
okay? Anything. So you have to have some values, right? Values. You say, what do I stand for is what are your values? What are your non-negotiable principles that guide and direct and shape every aspect of your life? You have to have values. For me, it's my faith, my family, and then also food. I love to eat real food, good food that God created. And then is how do I use and leverage who I am and what I stand for to make a difference in the lives and legacies of others? That's what I'm doing right now. And that when we talked about athletes, not really understanding purpose, and purpose is not a platform, right? Platform leads you to your purpose. And if you think that platform is your purpose, what happens when you come off that platform?
Right.
You're in
Right.
big trouble. You can't go in the phone booth anymore and come out as Superman. That's done. That's over with. You can't do that anymore. So who are you? And if you don't know who you are, you're not going to know what you stand for, and you're not going to know how to make a difference in the lives and legacies of others. It's really that simple. No one teaches you this. There's no course in this. You kind of have to learn on your own. And particularly when you grow up in public housing, you grow up on welfare, you grow up in a single parent household, you grow up in a dysfunctional environment, right? Your environment says you're nobody, right? So you go on this campaign to be somebody. And in your pursuit of that, you never truly feel or fulfill your purpose, right? Because it's all about paying back the haters. I'm talking about those who actually make it out. Okay,
Right.
not stuck and stranded in poverty. So my focus now is what can I do to make a difference in the lives and legacies of others? So I talked about reading. I love reading. I've written several books. This is my latest book called Momentum Power Play. It's kind of a sports-based book, how we talk about momentum in life, right? Or in sports, but it also applies to life. How do you create momentum when you never had it before? How do you keep it going once you got it? What about when you lose momentum, how do you get it back? We
Right.
know momentum shifts in sports. We see it, a fumble, an interception, a slam dunk, a timeout, someone gets injured or whatever, right? These things shift momentum. But what about in your own life? How are you using momentum, or is momentum using you? So my book called Psychonomics. I'm about the brain. I always say if you're not dealing with the brain, then you're not empowering people. You got to start here. You got to So this book is about sociopsychonomics. It's about social class and how the merging of social class and economics and psychology all come together. It's why we do what we do, and we do it unconsciously. We don't even really think about it, right? So this is very important. And then I wrote another book called The Stewardship Playbook, which is more of a faith-based book, and it uses the 5 positions on the basketball court to apply to certain areas of stewardship. So it's really the voice in using that. And I've always had a fondness for reading, and that's how I became a writer. And not only that, but me and my wife, we started the Lawrence Funderburke Youth Organization to really work with disadvantaged populations, vulnerable communities, particularly in our day and age. But we got to give people the tools, the traits, and the tips so that they can have success, right? So all these kids think they're going to be a basketball player, a football player, a rapper, or whatever. The reality is you can use your brain instead of using your body to have a very successful future. But you have to first be exposed to it, Frank. You have to be exposed to it. If there is no exposure, then there is no experience. If there is no experience, there's no expectation. So you got to get people exposed so that they can experience it, so that expectation can be there, that my future can be brighter and better than what my current situation is. And that's really what it's about. And I know you'll ask me some questions. I'll let you chime in, and particularly in terms of a couple of initiatives that I'm doing right now.
Well, the one thing that you mentioned that I think is perfect is in order to so-called repurpose yourself, you have to have a purpose to begin with. Mm-hmm. And I think people are just saying, I need to make change. Change to what? Mm-hmm. If you don't know what you stand for, how can you change your situation to what you stand for if you don't stand for anything. And I think that's a perfect example of a lot of people that have problems are just trying to make a solution without understanding the core of who they are. And if you, as you said, if you can't figure out the core of who you are, how can you make things work to your advantage? Because you're just out there doing stuff in the wind.
Yeah, and there's a good friend of mine. His name is Jerry Hammond here locally. He's very well known in Central Ohio. His father, Jerry Hammond Sr., you probably remember him. He was in the politics, but Jerry Hammond Jr. Is a very bright guy. He's in the golf world, played basketball as well, and he started this campaign called "In the Number." In the Number, and a lot of people don't know what that actually means. And I always say, if you're chasing a number, right? If you're chasing a number, I'm talking about athletes in terms of a jersey. If you're chasing your athletes, or if you're chasing a number playing a lottery or whatever, if you're chasing a number in terms of an income category or a net worth, right? If you're always chasing a number, then you can never be in the number. If you're not in a number, then you can't be counted. Counted for what? Counted on to be able to deliver the purpose for which you were called, right?
Right.
So helping people understand that to be in the number is to actually be counted upon. And a lot of people chase numbers. They chase this number. They chase that number. They chase a 9 to 5. But what about being in the number? What are you supposed to do with your life? How can you be counted, right? If you're always trying to counting, how can you be counted?
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to get people to understand. Your life must matter. You must be counted in a way that other people can say, yep, that person, all right, he or she has my best interest, and what they have to say is valuable, so I'm going to give them my ear, right? Because whenever I'm talking to someone, I don't want to waste your time. I want people, whoever's listening to me, to say, you know what, by listening to that person, Lawrence, for the last hour or half an hour, whatever the case may be, my life better off. One thing we can never get back is time. We can get money, right? We can get a status, position, but we can never get time. Once time is lost, we can never get it back. So you have to guard your time wisely, and you have to know what being in the number is, and you have to know that you can be counted, but only if you're counted, if you're following in your purpose. Purpose is what it's about. It's a very vague term, but purpose just simply means the assignment you were placed on this earth to accomplish for the benefit and betterment of others. And as a person of faith, right, glory and honor to Savior. So we got to understand what purpose is, and purpose is a very vague concept. People are confused by purpose because it's hard to quantify, but it's very easy to qualify. You got to be qualified for purpose before you can be counted upon.
Well, it's something that I've heard from a few people. You can't try and explain to other people what they should do if you don't know what you should do for yourself. You know, you're speaking from no experience about this is how I think you should live your life when you're not living your life well at all.
Yeah, very well said. You're exactly right. One thing I don't like is I don't like hypocrites, right? You know, whatever you say, that's what you should believe, and that's what you should stand for, right? Don't just say it to shift attention or to get someone's attention, right? You need to be about that. So I always say there's a big difference between the gift of gab and the gifting of grab. You can get someone's attention through smooth talk, but to keep their attention, you got to have that gifting of grab. You got to be able to grab them, and they need to know that I'm giving this person my attention, my time, because there's a reward in it for me. There's got to be something in it that a person will benefit from. And that's what makes an effective communicator.
Well, give us an idea of what the Retrofit project does or is about.
Yeah, you know, I think the 2020 protests spotlighted a glaring problem, that those who are left behind, right, or being left behind, right, are typically Black and brown individuals who are in vulnerable or disadvantaged situations. Okay, let's just be honest. Now, as an athlete, right, I grew up in that, but also I was afforded a lot of privileges, because when you're an athlete, you're afforded a lot of privileges. In many cases, you're treated better than mainstream society. If you're African American, you'll be treated better than rights. When you go into restaurants, right, you get the best seating. Sometimes you don't even have to pay for your food. I mean, people revere you because of your status as an athlete and what you provide them. But my thing is, for those who don't have any athletic ability, what can we value about them? Why aren't we making an investment in them? And I think that's what the whole movement was about. And I always say that we cannot legislate equality of outcomes. It's inherently unfair. When you play sports, the best players are the best players. Why? because they're the most talented. They put in the work. They stay after practice. I saw Kobe
Right.
Bryant. I remember I used to watch him, and even after the practice was over, he still practiced and worked on his game. And when you see players like that, I think about that as a self coming up as a kid, right? You have to have some type of meritocracy in terms of success. If not, if everybody's on the level playing field, then why does it bother for me to even practice or want to better myself? So you can't legislate equality of outcomes, but here's what you can do. You can legislate at a grassroots level equity of opportunities. Opportunities is how you build equity. Equity is all about having a skin in the game. If you're a fan, right, and particularly if you're graduate from Ohio State, you feel like you have equity in the game, right, because you graduate from there. There's a connection. There's a symbiotic connection that you have with the university because you're part of it. But how do we help people develop equity? How do you help people get skin in the game? And the only way you do that is if you allow them to order from the menu of success that those who take advantage of it, those are the privileged in our society. Because oftentimes when we think about it, we only allow people to get what we feel they need. So it's a pre-selected menu. And I always say, when you got to give people a 5-star experience in order for them to have success in life, meaning, but they first have to go through that door. And the reason why I say that is because those who are the movers and the shakers in our society, they frequent these places all the time. But when you order from the menu of success, right, it gives you a chance to be able to read. I talked about reading. It gives you a chance to read things clearly, correctly, and contextually in terms of life, in terms of what is required in order to be success. Where are you going, Lawrence? Where are you going with this? What I'm saying is that the menu of success is what all people should be ordering from, not just those who are privileged, not just those who are educated. All people should have a chance to order from the menu of success. I'm talking about a 5-star experience. If not, because we tend to only give people who are vulnerable, right, basics, right? I'm just giving you the basics, maybe housing stability, jobs stability, or maybe some food security, something like that. But we never give them more, because there's more than that in order for them to be successful, particularly when it comes to a legacy. So if you do not allow them to order from the menu of success, then you leave them unfulfilled and even hungry. Here's the big thing. Here's where I'm going with this. So for you listeners, like, where is he going? You're complicit in their starvation. What's starving for? Attention, eyeball hug, starving for success, starving for a better opportunity, starving for something to get out of this situation, this hellhole that I'm in, starving for just a fighting chance to be, guess what? A human being, to be treated in a humane manner. That's what they're fighting for. That's what they're starving for. That's what this whole movement, I believe, at its core, was all about. We get caught up in some of the emotionalism or whatever, but I want to get people back to really what's the core. So I started the Retrofit project and the Reparation moment. Retrofit meaning I'm trying to get more companies to build cultural capital with communities of color. Cultural capital is simply defined as the goodwill generated by an individual, family, and organization in meeting the needs, fulfilling the expectations within reason, and fulfilling or addressing the concerns of communities of color. And you build cultural capital, you build goodwill, you build your DE&I, your diversity, equity, inclusion, when you add cultural capital. And that is, right, in 2020, seeing is believing. People need to see, hey, do you really have a game plan to actually become more diverse in terms of your makeup, in terms of the people who work at your company? What about on your board? So the Retrofit project is really about, when you think of retrofit, when you think about something, it means that a component or accessory was added to a product that wasn't originally a part of manufacturing. What are you saying? Well, those who, like myself, who grew up in the hood, Pookie and Ray and others, black and brown individuals from the ghetto, right? They weren't retrofitted with that. They weren't given those things, so they have to be retrofitted, right? It's not their language, it's not their lingo, it's not their way of experiencing things. So you have to expose them. You have to allow them to order from that menu of success. So retrofitting is putting on the proper accessories and components. And then you have to have the recruiting. You have to recruit them into universities, into businesses. You got to expose them. You got to give them an opportunity to expand their knowledge base. And number 3, retaining. You got to not only get them there, but they got to stay there. Because many African Americans, right, one of the things, if they're in an exclusively all white environment at work, they say, I don't fit in here, because look around, I don't really see people like me. So you have to be able to not only retrofit, you have to recruit, and then you have to retain. That's the Retrofit project. And then you can chime in and I can talk a little bit about the Reparation moment.
Well, it seems to me that what we do is that we work on the superficiality of what we think the problem is. So
Great.
we put some money in here. You know, we paint some walls there. We go
Mm.
in and we wave and smile and go, look, we fix some windows and now everything's going to be perfect. And yet the mentality is still the same. You
Mm.
haven't really changed anything. You've
Mm.
just glossed over it. So
Mm.
what you're saying is go in, fix the problems, the core problems, and again you go, now you're dealing with the culture, you're dealing with the character, and now you can see, and this is where you mentioned about reading. It's not just the physical reading, it's also being able to read what's going on around you.
That's it.
So you're able to read and understand the hypocrisy of what's
Mm.
swirling in the air. You're able to understand who's true and who's not. And if
Mm-hmm.
you're able to get people to understand that for themselves, not because you told them that, because they've told themselves that, and now they understand the core of who they are and
Mm-hmm.
what they should be, it makes it, I don't know if it makes it easier, but now you have a place to go when someone provides you with an opportunity. Because an opportunity is just an opportunity. If you don't take advantage of it, it doesn't mean anything. So,
Mm-hmm.
like I said, if someone comes in and says, we're going to spread $20,000 in this neighborhood, and all it does is buy a bicycle for a kid that already has a bicycle, it gets, a meal for a day, which is good. But as the old saying is, did you learn how to provide for yourself as opposed to somebody providing for you? And
Mm-hmm.
I like where you're going with that, and I understand the importance of that, because that's what we're trying to showcase here, people that do that. So now when we get to the reparation moment, that seems to me, I'm not going to prejudge it. Go ahead and tell me about that.
Well, first of all, I want to give you, if I could stand up, give you a standing ovation. That was excellent what you shared, right? You talked about culture, right? You talked about character. And another one is competency, right? You got to be competent, but you got to build people up, right? The only way you take advantage of opportunities, right, to give you options and they have optimism is you got to be able to take advantage of them, right? But if you don't have the skills, tools, if you haven't been retrofitted, how can you take advantage of any opportunities that come your way? Again, how can you build equity? How can you get any skin in the game if you don't have, right, the right tools, the right uniform on to play the game? I always say this: if you are not playing the game, then you're getting played by the game. You're getting played by the game.
Right.
And getting people to understand there are rules of this game. I'm talking about the game of success or the game of life. There are rules in this game. You need to know how to play. And if you don't, then you get punished. And you're going to sit on the sidelines. It's one of the worst things when you get in foul trouble. You got to go to the bench, you got to sit and you got to watch, and you can't help your team. It's the same way. We got to look at life from a wide lens. I use sports. I use a lot of different things. So when it comes to the reparation moment, most people, when they talk about reparations, particularly white America, privileged America, they get very nervous, right? Because they're thinking, well, wait a minute, you want me to pay the price for the misdeeds of my ancestors on your ancestors. And my thing is, it's not about relitigating the past, but we have to learn from the past so we can move forward to have a better and brighter future. That's why we use that. So I'm not about relitigating the past. And when I talked about reading, and the reason why I say that is because my grandmother, I remember when she passed, and her grandmother was a slave child. Okay. And she said she used to go over to her house. She was a small girl, my grandmother, Adele Villa. She used to go over to her house. And then when she would walk by her grandmother's door, particularly when she was sleeping, she could hear her in the room. She could hear her in the room saying, no, master, stop beating me. No, 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 master, because that was a nightmare. It was a trauma that she experienced. She was manifesting through her dream, not a dream, a nightmare. Okay. That always placed a thought in my grandmother that I have to take advantage of opportunities. And one is reading, because back in the day, when we were slaves, if we were caught reading, we were what? We could be beat, we could be killed, or what more than likely happened was we were shipped off that plantation. Why?
Right.
Because reading gives you power. Power gives you influence, right? And if you have influence, you can what? You can help change the trajectory of other people's lives and legacies. Right. That's what it's about. That's why reading is so important. That's why I encourage reading. I love reading. And when it comes to the reparation moment, it's not about making amends for the wrongs of the past. What it's saying is, what can we do right now moving forward to help people who historically had no equity build equity so that our country can have, right? A playing field with a lot of people can play this game, not just a few. You understand what I'm saying? So the reparation moment for us as Black people also, we're not going to be given a plot of land. There's no pot of gold that's going to be given to us. There's no promise of equality that's going to be given to us. No matter what has been said, no matter what has been shared, no matter what has been stated, it doesn't matter. We're not getting any of those. But here's what we have, and particularly as African Americans. The moment the spotlight is on us now, the glare is very bright. I've never seen so much focus on African Americans. I just celebrated on Tuesday my 50th birthday. And I've never seen so many opportunities for African Americans like today. But again, we have to have more to our value proposition than the color of our skin, right? We got to have some substance behind this. And your value proposition has to stand the test of time. Not only that people want your value proposition, but they'll continue to pay you for it. That is where I think that this whole moment is really about. It's not a movement, it's a moment now. And I think the spotlight and the companies are scrambling. Well, what do? I have a lot of friends who are white and males in leadership position. They say, Lawrence, I don't really know what to do. I wrote an article about cultural competency and where do we go from here? And a lot of them says, because I don't want to be branded the R word or racist if I speak my mind. And I said, you know what you can't do is just pass the buck and say it's somebody's responsibility. If you initiate it, then you got to be part of the change that is necessary. All right, that needs to happen in your organization. So the reparation moment, right, is about helping people build equity. Equity is the key, right? Not equality, because you can have equality and have no equity.
Right.
Okay. You need equity. You need equity. And that is what I'm trying to do, is get people to understand that the reparation moment for Black people right now is upon us. But we have to capitalize on the moment, but we have to have some substance behind us. It's not just hiring you just for the sake of your skin color.
Right.
If you're going to stay at that job, if you're going to retain that job, you're going to have to be able to add some value to that job, to that employer. This is where I think we need to shift our focus, particularly because we have the wrong thing. We've been throwing all this money at this issue in terms of anti-poverty, right? But we tried to get people optimistic about a future that they've never seen before. In Columbus, Ohio, you remember 270, right? A lot of kids have never been outside of 270. Right. We did an investing game with kids, and I'll let you speak on this. We did an investing game on kids because we teach kids real world topics. As a certified financial planner, I want to teach them things that they don't have to know right now, but they can know in the future, and you can direct them to that future based on what you teach them today, what you expose them to, right? And I remember we were teaching kids, and we create all these apps and very cool things. One day we'd like to sell them or license them on a wide scale. But we take these kids, we meet them where they are, very sensory-driven experience. And we were teaching kids about investing, and we were investing in multinational companies. Well, we asked a kid about this particular restaurant. We said, where is it located? And you know what his response was? Livingston Avenue. Because in his mind, he only saw it in his neighborhood because that's the only place he's been. He's never been really outside of that.
Outside, right.
So, but they're multinational. They're not even just local or national. They're multinational, they're international, they're global. But his mentality, his mindset, his frame of reference was local, was on his street, was in his neighborhood. I ask kids all the time, I'll say this, the last thing, every time I go into inner city communities, I'll ask kids, I'll talk about college. We do college planning and getting kids excited about that. We say, look, if you're a minority or if you're smart, you can get pretty much all your school paid for. You don't have to be an athlete, right? But you just need to be talented upstairs, right up here. And we asked the kids in Columbus, Ohio, we asked them, how many of you have never been on Ohio State's campus? Oh, wait. We watched the Buckeyes. People say, go to college. How many of you have never, ever been on Ohio State's campus? Overwhelming majority raised their hands and say, I've never been on Ohio State's campus. I'm talking about teenagers. I'm not talking about 8, 9-year-olds. I'm talking about teenagers in this city. Now, if you ask whites and Asians, right, and Indians and others, they probably say, yeah, I've definitely been on. You're talking about 80, 90% have been on that campus. But maybe 30%, 40% of African-American kids, teenagers, have been on Ohio State campus. There's something wrong with that picture, Frank. Let's be frank about it. There's something wrong with that picture.
And carry that a step further, you also could say, have you been on the campus of Capitol?
Same. Denison
Columbus
University.
State. Right,
Otterbein.
Denison, right.
I
Dominican, right.
And I apologize. I'm sorry. It's not. It's and anyone who knows me knows I love education. I promote quality education, whether it's Denison or Otterbein or Capital or any of these universities.
Something, right?
Yeah, exactly right. Ohio Christian College, it doesn't matter as long as you're getting the issue is, were you exposed to a campus
No,
experience?
right.
And for many of these kids, no. How can you teach? How can you tell them? How can you motivate them to want to go to college if they've never been on a college campus? How can you tell them to achieve a brighter and better future if they don't even know what that future looks like, if they've never experienced it? I know I get emotional about this because as a kid, I grew up and I worked at Cooper Stadium. I worked at Ohio Stadium football. I sold the hot dogs and the Cokes and all that. And I left my neighborhood to experience something better.
Right.
Yes, I was going for the money and wanted to have some, and I spent it unfortunately on video games. All right. But what did I learn? I was able to see and interact with people from different walks of life and experiences. It taught me the value of working hard. It taught me how to be responsible. All of these different things. It taught me about sacrifice. And I remember meeting the famous linebacker. I can't think, he had the issues with his neck. I know he'd be like, hey, how you not going to remember me? Chris Spielman. I remember seeing him and meeting him at a restaurant. Okay, I was like, wow, man, there's Chris Spielman. I was a kid and I looked up, I said, man, there's Chris Spielman. And when you step on a campus, it's not just wanting to go to college, it's the experience, is what college can provide. And that taught me a valuable lesson that not only was I working it, because you have to walk through campus in order to get to Ohio Stadium. When you're getting dropped off at High Street, you got to walk through campus. So you see those buildings and all that. What do they mean? Who are the names? Who are those people? What is legacy really about? You learn that in your own way at a very early age. That's why I think kids have to go on any campus. It doesn't matter what type of campus, should be a quality campus. All kids need to experience that. Thank you for pointing that out.
Well, one thing we also get from that is that, and you mentioned, that restaurant's on Livingston Avenue. Well, we live life, unfortunately, through the medium that we have without actually physically discovering what else is out there. So we see things on TV and we can see something happen in Detroit, but we don't really know where Detroit is. We can see something happening in Los Angeles, but we really don't know anything about Los Angeles. I drove here I was on Livingston Avenue. So I'm in Las Vegas now. I was living just off Livingston Avenue. I went 5 minutes, got on 70, and 70 ran all the way here. And I went through a lot of places that I knew of intellectually where they were, but I didn't know where they were in the context of where I was. So I drove through East St. Louis. I'd heard of East St. Louis, but I'd never been in East St. Louis. And I was like, hey, there are people here. It's not just some statistic on a crime scene, a crime map. There are people here. I drove through Kansas, and other than the fact that there are a lot of spots where there's nothing, but I also drive through and go, there are people here. They do things here. They exist. And understanding that whether you're here, whether you're in Switzerland, whether you're in Alaska, people matter, and people's thoughts and their opinions matter. And like you said, we need to get out and see them instead of just seeing them on a screen, especially on a Twitter account or something like that. So I appreciate what you're saying there, that being on Ohio State campus, and I was fortunate because my brother and sister both went to Ohio State before me. So I kind of ran around a little bit and went, yeah, there's no other reason to go anyplace else because this place has it all. Now, I could have gone to Bowling Green and maybe said the same thing, but I walked on that campus and went, buildings, people, education, tradition. I'm going to get something from this when I get here because other people have done the same thing. And it's open. That's one thing you mentioned. It's open. It wasn't like I had to struggle to get in. I just had to qualify to get into the school, and they were giving me things. I didn't have to take education. I was given education. Now, part of that is you have to capitalize on what they're giving, but they were giving me information. And the more you delve into that, the more you get and the more you can give back.
Hey, very well said. I love that. And you're exactly right. And again, it's really, it comes down to, in order to have equity, you got to have opportunities, you got to have options, and that leads to optimism. And really, it comes down to being an outlier. I always saw myself as being an outlier. There's a book called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. I don't know if you've ever read that book, but it's a very interesting book. And particularly when you're working with inner city kids, vulnerable communities, I'm teaching them how to be an outlier, because if you're an inlier, you're going to always be trapped and stuck in that environment. You're not getting out. If you're an inlier, if you're on that line, you're not getting out. But if you're an outlier, you get out and you can stay out, but you can go back in and help others get out, right? That is the key. That is, I saw myself, I'm gonna be honest with you, Frank, as going into broadcasting or going on to Wall Street. I just, I love to speak. I have a proclivity in terms of Wall Street and everything surrounding that. But my gifting, right, where God wanted me to be is where I am, to go into these places, to go in these communities and to say, listen, this is me. Like when I go in, I carry a food stamp in my pocket as a constant reminder about poverty, because I never want to be disconnected from where I come from.
Right.
I have right here this hood. I have a hood on. Okay. I have a hood. It's not about a movement. It's not about a movement. It's about a moment, and it's about a memory. What I remember about growing up in the hood, in the ghetto, and those who are trapped and stuck and stranded there. That's why I wear a hood. It's not about a movement. It's not about a movement with me. It's about a moment. And that's why I want to get those who are on the left or those who are on the right. I want them to be part of this moment. I'm not going to argue with you over politics. I don't have time for that.
Right.
Lives and legacies are on the line. You talked about it. You talked about people and tradition and education. All of that speaks to one word, Frank: legacy. What is our legacy going to be? Are we going to be on the right side of history with the moment, or on the wrong side of history? The choice is ours to make or to lose. We either opt in or we opt out. So that's what I'm trying to start with this. And I always say this, that Black lives do matter without question, because for so long we've discounted the quality, right, of a Black life. When we watch TV and those who may say, oh, well, there they go again, they're killing themselves, they're another crime statistic. Well, you just discounted the value of a Black life if you have that perception or that opinion. However, Black legacies matter more, because you first must live life before you have a fighting chance at a winning legacy. Legacy stands the test of time. A life can only capitalize on the moment in time, but a legacy stands the test of time. And legacy is simply the residue of a well-lived, a well-learned, and a well-loved life. That's legacy. Legacy is what you leave behind. Or as Woody Hayes said, what? Paying it what? Pay it forward.
Pay it forward.
Pay it forward. Your legacy is paying it forward, but you first must have a legacy. Everybody will leave behind a legacy, but not everybody has a legacy worth leaving behind. Legacy is your footprint.
You're talking about books. There's a book that Rashad McCants wrote, and it was called Plantation Education or something along that line. I have it sitting over here on my shelf someplace.
I'm gonna get that.
And it's because if you know Rashad, you know that he's also different, and he's outspoken about being different. And I wanted to ask you about the idea of, especially now that we have the one and dones, and the people that go to college because they're given an opportunity to go to the NBA.
Right.
Not necessarily taking advantage of what they've been given to take advantage of, because the way it works, they're going to give you something so you can shine for them, but you're also going to take from them what you want for yourself. And if you're not taking advantage of that, there's a question here coming somewhere, but the idea is, what is it that these people that are the one and dones, are they getting anything for what they're being given?
Hey, listen, that's a great question. It's a very thought-provoking question. It's a very, quite frankly, perplexing question. But here's the thing. But if you never set yourself up to appreciate the value of education, how are you going to capitalize on something that you don't value?
Right.
Again, that's why I teach kids about values and what are values, your guiding principles that shape your daily decisions, actions, and activities. If you don't have a value system by default, guess what? That is your value system.
Right.
You've just expressed it, and you're going to be paid. You're going to be punished for it accordingly. And here's the issue is, and when it comes to paying athletes and the things like that, and I remember being on a panel with several athletes, particularly Maurice Claret. They had me on one side and him on the other side. Now, people say, well, you grew up in a hood, you grew up on Struggle Street, you carry a food stamp in your pocket. How can you be against athletes getting paid? My thing is this, right? If you're getting paid, you have a temporary mindset, right?
Right.
But if you're being rewarded, you have a long-term mentality, right? The reward is what you get from going to college. Yes, I get it's different time. I remember the number 34 jersey at Ohio State. There was, a lot of jerseys sold. I helped the university bring in a lot of money to Ohio State even back then. That was really when the cycle, this trajectory in terms of the big time college athletes really started, in the early 90s. So I get it, but obviously it's on warp speed now. But if you start paying them, then they're going to say, well, I'm a professional athlete. And I know and once you do that, once you make that decision, you can't go back.
Turn back. Right.
You can't turn back. So my thing is, if you're going to pay athletes, right, how do you make it fair, right? Because there's only 2 sports that actually bring in any revenue: men's basketball and football. They subsidize all the other sports.
Right.
And it's true. You basically got poor black kids subsidizing rich white kids playing other sports. I mean, let's be frank. Let's be honest.
That's real. That's real. Yeah.
And the reason why I said is my daughter is a swimmer. She's going to be swimming at Ohio State. She's getting a athletic scholarship to Ohio State. She's swimming. Now, as hard as she works, and I always say swimming is harder than any sport. Football, basketball is harder. But people don't pay to go watch swimming. They got a great program. Right. Or baseball or wrestling, for that matter, which has historically been a great program.
Really hard, yeah, right.
Right, but you got lacrosse and you got soccer and you got these sports and you got, golf, right? And a lot of these sports historically were never available for African Americans. Particularly golf didn't happen until Tiger Woods. I didn't start playing golf until Tiger Woods came on the scene.
Right.
I was like, man, that's a waste of time. Then I realized, wow, right? I was wasting my time not playing golf.
Right.
Okay. So we have to say, well, what do we need to do to help these kids? Not about the next 4 years, but the next 40 years. Because I think kids should stay at school at least 2 years, because your first year is your hardest year, right? You're trying to find yourself, find your niche on the team, etc. You're off away from your home environment. It's a very difficult time, but it's a time to what? To grow up. That's why when I was at Indiana before I came to Ohio State, it was very difficult. I did not take that opportunity the way I should. And as a result, I didn't handle it correctly. But a lot of these kids, they need 2 years, because 2 years it takes for you to say, okay, now I know what this is about. I know what I need to do to take advantage of the situation and allow it. And instead of allowing the situation to take advantage of me, because that's what athletics does. You go to college and then you're given this scholarship, but people don't take advantage of that. And again, if someone is bringing in millions of dollars and someone's getting a $30,000 or $40,000 scholarship a year, is that fair? It's not about equality, right? It's really about equity. How can you help people have skin in the game, regardless of what the situation is? And my goal is to try to get athletes to be serious about this. And I know it's not a popular thing to say, but I say, you know what? If you're paying these athletes, are you actually handicapping them in a process as well?
Right.
How do you make it fair, right? Right. The quarterback, particularly for Ohio State, I mean, he's the most important position. So if he's someone who's third string, doesn't play, how do you make it fair, right? And those who play other sports, right, like football, they're putting in just as much time and effort and energy in their sport. So how do you make this fair? You can't make it fair. So once you go down that slope, it's a slippery slope. But there's some things that you can do, like a 401k plan, where every year you stay, you get some money credited to your account. You can get that afterwards. Right. Or you set up a scholarship fund where if you have children, your kids can go to this school for free, right? There's some things creatively you can do to help, right? Their family and a lot of these athletes, their family can't watch them play. I know COVID is the case, but before that, they didn't have the money to be able to go watch, the travel. If they were out of state, you can't go back home. You don't have the money. So I understand some things that you can actually do to actually help this become more equitable. Not equality. We're trying to make everybody equal. You can't make everybody equal. The only thing you can do is provide equity and let people have skin in the game and then find their path in life, and you give them and you empower them with the right tools and skills.
Well, you brought up 3 points that I'd like to look at. And I know we said it was only going to be half an hour. We're going on an hour here. Sorry about that. But 3 points that I'd like to look at. One, I interviewed Leah Panett, who was a synchronized swimmer at Ohio State. And I asked that question. So, you're 5'3", and how do people notice that you are an athlete when you're walking across campus? She said, well, it's easy. I said, how's that? When I walk into class in the morning, my hair is wet. I've already been in the pool. I've already worked out. I've already done everything I'm supposed to do before I go to class. So those are people that are there working behind the scenes. And like you said, she's on scholarship, though her program isn't bringing me money, but she was able to do things for herself and for people after that. So that's where that part comes from. The second thing I wanted to ask you is, and I was going to get to this, but I wasn't sure we were going to lead to that. When, and your situation obviously is probably different than other people's were. A bad fit, things weren't going well at Indiana, and you decided to leave. Mm-hmm. Now, if I'm not mistaken, at that point, if you transferred in conference, Did you have to pay for your tuition after that?
I had to pay I had to pay just like I had debt, I
Right.
had staff loans, I had
Right.
some scholarships and stuff too. And thank God for that. I had Pell Grants as well,
Right.
for needy students. So I was able, but I did have several grants and I owed several thousands of dollars. So I walked away. So I wasn't like everybody else and they say, oh, you're on scholarship, athletic scholarship and you don't have to pay. No, 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 no. When I walked away from college, I had debt as well. Now
Right.
I went pro so I could pay it back immediately the next year. Right. But I took on debt just like everybody else because I transferred in conference. You're right.
Okay. Now, the main reason I asked that, though, is because the transfer rules are different now. And as you're saying, skin in the game and those kind of things. Now, if you just feel like it's time to go, you
That's
can
right.
go. Is that fair? Because obviously there were restrictions, so you really had to make sure you wanted to leave Indiana to come back to Ohio State. You just didn't go, yeah, sounds like a good idea. So should there be restrictions in that as we're trying to get people to grow up, or are we empowering them to just say, if I don't like a situation that isn't really beneficial to me and I can go any place else I want to, instead of being forced to stick around to deal with the decision you already made?
Listen, again, that's an excellent question, and obviously very thought-provoking and perplexing and controversial to some degree. And here's what I say about that. You're empowering them to be controlled and ruled by their feelings, not their values. Let me say it again. You're empowering them to be controlled, right, or ruled or influenced by their feelings, not their values. I'm talking about young people. They're on this growth path, right? They're developing, right? They haven't developed, okay?
Right.
We all, when we were in college, right? And sometimes we refer to them as kids. That is true because they haven't matured to the point really yet of being a full-fledged adult, okay? So we're empowering them to rely solely on their feelings as their guide in terms of decisions, not values, right? Not values, not that reflective side of your brain, but that autonomic side of your brain where your feelings rule the day. Comfort, ease, that's what that side of the brain wants. But the reflective side, right? The conscious side says, no, let's evaluate the consequences here, right? Let's weigh the evidence. And we handicap these young people when we create an environment where there are no rules, there are no restrictions. Right. You need boundaries, right? Why do you have rules in game? There has to be boundaries, right? Why do you have referees? There has to be boundaries. And our society has pivoted to the point where we say, let's just give them total latitude. Where if you give them total latitude, what does that lead to? It can lead to a questionable attitude, right? And then if you don't give them the right latitude and you don't have the right attitude, then guess what? That's going to stifle your altitude. And in turn, it's not going to give you the aptitude that you need to say, you know what, I need to learn certain things so that I can have a successful future. That's going to help me, not handicap me. We're handicapping our young people by creating this environment where there are no rules, there are no restrictions, whatever you want, however you feel, right? That rules the day. No, we're handicapping not only these kids, but we're crippling their legacy. Let me say that again. We're handicapping these kids while at the same time crippling their legacy, the people who are coming behind them, who are attached to them. So you have to have some rules and restrictions, right? When colleges invest in you, when they recruit you, no, you're not property of that university, okay? But there has to be a commitment, just like when you hire by a company, there has to be some type of commitment there. They make an investment on you, they want a return on that investment. Now it's like, you know what? You know what's real bad about this is a kid can train. I know these college students are not going to like what I have to say here, but you don't even have to call the coach. You can text them. You can just leave and not, that's why my daughter, when she was getting recruited, I said, you're not going to text any of these colleges and stuff. She was getting recruited by Michigan. Yeah, I know they have a great swim program. By Florida, by Indiana. I went there, and Ohio State. And I said, you're going to call each one of those schools as her father, as her daddy. Daddy's a title you earn through relationship. That's how you build equity. Father is just a title you earn through relationship. It's just a biological term. But I said, as her dad, I said, you're going to call all of those schools and you're going to tell them, hey, thank you for recruiting me, but I just want you to know I'm going to Ohio State. Here's why. Not text them. That's too impersonal. You call them. And I think we've made it so easy now for these kids to walk away from responsibilities that they've already committed to. That's my point, Frank.
Okay, and that's, you know what? That is a perfect way to tie things up, because that is the way I see that we need to get this across to people. That it's not just, and that's a perfect thing with texting and this communication that we have. It's so much easier to make things harder now.
I love that.
You know,
Mm,
it's
I
just
love
so
it.
easy to say, yeah, I'll just, well, our miscommunication the other day. It was so
Mm,
easy to fix it, but
mm,
it was so easy for it to go wrong because I didn't pick up the phone.
mm,
And I just
mm,
went, well, yeah, I'll this, and it takes another day to get it reestablished. And now you've taught me a lesson today. Thank you very much.
mm-hmm,
But
mm-hmm.
that is a perfect way of looking at it. And the third thing I have, I'll ask you after we get off the air, because I don't think it's, not that it's not for public consumption, but I don't think it's germane to what we've just been talking about. So,
Yeah. And then you can also talk about how people, if they want to get in touch, if they want to support my
oh
movement,
please, yes.
they can purchase books. We will be having some shirts and some hats and some other things. And they can go to Mr. Fundy, MRFUNDY.com. So you can go there. You can reach me if you want to reach out to me by phone. You can get the number there as well. You can email me also at info@mrfundy.com. And my thing is, hey, let's get on this. Let's unite. Let's get on one team together, right? Because if we're not united as a team, then everyone loses the game. Okay, so we have to understand that. So I just thank you for your time. I thank you
Oh, no
for
problem at all.
your insights, because what you shared brought out the best in me. So I just thank you for that opportunity and for being an advocate for former athletes and really creating positive change, lasting change, legacy-minded change. That's what it's all about, Mr. Gordon.
And we will make sure we have those links with this and also on the website and all that stuff. So, Lawrence, I really appreciate you taking the time. This has been enlightening. It's been interesting. It's been fun. And serious conversation isn't always fun. So, this was a serious conversation. I'm glad you joined us. And I apologize for flaking out on you yesterday, but I think we
No.
made up for it today.
We made it forward. And I always say, when people interview me, they say, oh, well, it's only got 30 minutes. It goes to an hour, 90 minutes, because it's the conversation, because
Right.
I'm sparking them, they're sparking me. And I want to give value. Again, if you're giving me your time, I don't want to waste your time. There has to be some substance that I give to you that can be used in not only your life, but also your legacy as well. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.